The urn was still warm from the sun resting in my hands like something alive. I stood on the porch where I had once planted hydrangeas with Ethan, back when he said, "This is your home too, Mom." Now the brass number above the door seemed colder, sharper. The kind of place you knocked instead of walking in. The door opened before I could lift my hand. Lena stood there. No mascara streaks, no tissue in hand. Just a silk blouse, high-waisted trousers, and eyes that had dried hours ago. She didn't look at the urn. She looked at my hands. "My key. You're not family anymore," she said. Her voice was flat, too rehearsed to be grief. "You can leave your key, Corinne." She didn't call me Mom. Not that she ever did. Behind her, 2 uniformed men shifted in the hallway, their posture too polite to be casual. I knew their type private security hired for photo ops, not danger. And yet here they were, summoned like I was a threat. I tightened my fingers around the urn. "I'm here to bring my son home," I said, my voice lower than I expected. "He wanted to be on the mantle." Lena folded her arms. "That mantle belongs to the owner, which is me. And you've overstayed." Overstayed. The word hung in the air like smoke. I built this house with Ethan, chose the tiles, paid for the landscaping when his startup was in debt. I held him when the first investor walked away and sat in that very kitchen watching him rebuild it all. I should have left right then, but I stood still. "You can stay at a hotel," Lena added, gesturing toward the driveway. "I'll have someone bring your things down." She turned, heels clicking against marble, and the guard stepped forward. I didn't move. I looked past them into the house, into the silence Ethan left behind, and I whispered to him, "Not her. I'm not leaving. Not yet." The suitcases hit the concrete with a dull thud, one after the other. I didn't flinch. Years of holding things together, marriages, jobs, and then Ethan had taught me how to keep my spine straight, even when everything else crumbled. Lena didn't look at me when she shut the trunk of her luxury SUV, but her smile, tight and practiced, snapped into place the second she turned toward the reporters across the street. "Grief is heavy," she said, voice just loud enough to carry. "But we carry it with grace." A camera shutter clicked. Another flash. She placed a delicate hand over her chest like someone preparing for a eulogy, not someone who had just dumped the ashes of her husband's mother onto a driveway. I didn't speak. I didn't give them anything they could spin. When the last flash went off, Lena turned on her heel and stalked past me into the house. I followed, without asking. I had a key once. I had a name here once. Inside, the smile disappeared. "You were a guest," she said, closing the door behind us. "And the guest room is closed." I stared at her. It wasn't a guest room. It was my son's house. "Exactly," she said. "Was." She stepped closer, folding her arms like she was wrapping herself in power. "The reading is in 3 days. And just so we're clear, I know exactly what's in that will." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I gave Ethan everything he had," she continued. "While you dropped in like some legacy ghost and thought you'd haunt our lives forever. Still, I said nothing." She leaned in then, and for a split second, I could see the nerves beneath the smugness. 3 days, and I get to erase you for good. I looked past her at the photo still hanging in the hallway, Ethan and me at his first product launch. His hand gripping mine. His smile honest. His voice echoing somewhere in the back of my mind. Don't trust her. So I didn't. I waited. 3 days was enough. The study still smelled like him coffee ink, something warm that didn't belong to Lena's world of sharp perfumes and cold surfaces. I didn't ask permission to enter. She was too busy entertaining condolence calls downstairs, each one a performance layered with carefully timed sighs and practiced sorrow. I closed the door behind me and stood in silence for a moment. His chair was pushed in as always. The blinds were halfway drawn, orderly, calm, but something was wrong. I went straight to the desk. The bottom drawer had always been locked. It was where Ethan kept the things he didn't want others rifling through: notes, backup drives, old sketches. I'd once joked that it held his real thoughts, not just the public ones. I slid a letter opener into the latch and popped it. Empty. Too empty. Not even dust. I sat back slowly, heart steady but hollow. Ethan had called me 3 weeks before he died. His voice was low, tired, but focused. He said he'd finally made changes to the will to protect what matters, he said. I didn't push for details. I wish I had. Lena had power of attorney toward the end. She claimed it was to help manage hospital paperwork, ease the burden. Had she done more? Had she found this drawer before me, I turned to the bookshelf and ran my fingers along the spines until I reached the journal. I knew he used the leather one with the clasp. Gone. A clean gap sat between 2 unread biographies. It was subtle, but I noticed it immediately. It wasn't misfiled. It was missing. A knot formed in my stomach. I opened the top drawer of the desk, rifled through pens and envelopes until I found a small yellow post-it curled at the edges. It had one thing written on it, a 10-digit number. I slipped it into my coat pocket and closed the drawer. Someone else had been here first, but maybe not fast enough. I sat in my car at the edge of the estate, the yellow slip resting on the passenger seat like it was heavier than it should be. I stared at the number again, then dialed before I could think my way out of it. 3 rings, then a voice. Yeah, hi. I'm looking for Jared Kellner. A pause, then cautious. Who's asking? My name is Corinne Adler. I'm Ethan's mother. The silence that followed hit like a wave, then a sharp breath. Corinne, he said. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to reach you. I didn't even know if he cut himself off. I was at the service. In the back. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the sound of someone who had truly known my son settle the ache. I found your number in his desk, I said. I think he left it for me. That makes sense. Another pause. He didn't trust a lot of people toward the end, but he trusted you. And me. I waited. He told me Jared said, voice lower now, that Lena was seeing someone else. A venture capitalist out of Seattle. They were meeting in hotels during his treatment. My stomach clenched. He said she'd been pressuring him to sign over the company, the accounts. Everything. Did he? I asked. No, Jared said firmly. He was scared, but he wasn't stupid. He said he was working with a lawyer, Benjamin Roth, I think, from Charleston. Said he was adding something to the will. My hand tightened on the phone. He told me, Jared, if anything happens to me before I finish this, tell my mom not to trust Lena. She's already rewriting the ending. I didn't speak. You still there? Jared asked. Yes, I said. I'm going to find that lawyer. Good, he said. Because Ethan didn't leave you unprotected, he just didn't get the chance to say how. I ended the call, turned the key in the ignition, and drove toward the city. Benjamin Roth's office sat high above the harbor, a pane of glass between me and the city. I didn't wait for an invitation to sit. My hands were still steady from the drive, but my chest felt like it held a fist instead of a heart. He rose from behind his desk, a tall man with silver hair and a voice like polished wood. Mrs. Adler, he said, extending a hand. I'm sorry for your loss. I shook it once firm. I'm not here for condolences. I'm here for the truth. His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. The will is scheduled to be read on Friday. You'll be there. I need to know what's in it before then, I said quietly. Lena has already thrown me out of the house. She thinks she's untouchable. Benjamin glanced at the door to be sure it was closed, then walked back to his desk. He opened a folder, then closed it again, without looking at me. You understand I'm bound by instructions, he said. Your son was very clear. I leaned forward. Instructions about what? He hesitated, then reached for a brass key. The bottom drawer slid open with a muted click. He drew out a thin envelope sealed with Ethan's initials and set it on the desk between us. "Yes, Corinne," he said. "There's an addendum, but I was told not to reveal it until the reading." My fingers hovered over the envelope but didn't touch it. "Why wait?" Benjamin's voice lowered. "Because your son knew she'd strike fast, and he needed her to show her hand first. Every action she takes now, every eviction notice, every signature is evidence." I felt my breath settle into something colder, steadier. Ethan had planned for this. Even at the end, he had been playing the board 2 moves ahead. Benjamin slid the envelope back into the drawer and locked it. "Be at the reading," he said. "That's when this all turns." I rose without another word, feeling the weight shift inside me as I walked out into the hallway. The conference room smelled of fresh polish and anticipation. I arrived early, taking the seat farthest from the head of the table. I wanted to watch Lena walk in. I wanted to see how she wore the crown she thought she'd stolen. She didn't disappoint. Draped in black silk, her makeup flawless, she floated into the room like a widow from a magazine cover. Her heels clicked softly across the floor. She nodded at Benjamin Roth, but the rest of the room house staff, family friends, and 2 witnesses I didn't recognize received only the barest glance. No one met her eyes. Benjamin didn't bother with small talk. He opened the folder and began. To Lena Whitaker Adler, he read, "I leave the Adler estate located at 18 Belrose Lane, including the primary residence vehicles and all curated art collections held within." Lena smiled. Not too wide, just enough to gloat behind her grief. She folded her hands in her lap like someone posing for a portrait, but Benjamin didn't close the folder. "Now," he said, his voice even moved to the conditional clause. The air shifted. Lena's expression flickered barely, but I caught it. Her fingers twitched against her thigh. The room went quiet. Benjamin lifted a small black remote and pressed a button. The screen behind him lit up. Ethan's face appeared. It was taken in his study. He looked pale, thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were clear, focused. "If you're watching this," he said, "I'm already gone. And if Lena has forced my mother from our home, then she has violated everything I put in place to protect her." Lena shifted in her seat. "I gave you everything I could." Ethan continued, "But not a free pass to erase the woman who raised me. If you pushed her out, humiliated her, or denied her a place in the house she helped build, then you forfeit your inheritance. That was my condition." Benjamin nodded to the man beside him. "This is Caleb Jansen, the notary who recorded the addendum." Lena stood up sharply, her chair scraping, but it was too late. Ethan had spoken. Benjamin pressed play again. The second recording began with Ethan's voice quiet but firm. He sat at the same desk, though this time his posture looked stronger. His eyes didn't just carry exhaustion, they carried intent. "If Lena shows her teeth," he said, let her. Let her try. That's how we'll know." He paused, glanced at the camera, then continued. "To my mother, Corinne Adler, I leave 60% of Adler Kellner Ventures, including all voting shares, intellectual rights and executive oversight." A ripple ran through the room. "I didn't move," Ethan went on. "I also leave the Adler Foundation in her name. She knows how to use it. She always did more than just love me. She taught me how to stand. And if anyone questions this recording, refer to the document signed March 3rd. The notary is present." The clause was clear. He folded his hands on the desk. "If Lena violates the condition, if she forces my mother out, she forfeits everything. No mansion, no cars, no cash, not a cent, not a stone." The screen faded to black. Lena erupted. "This is manipulation," she shouted. "He was dying." She got to him. She turned him against me. She pointed a trembling finger at me. Eyes wide, voice rising. Tell them you made him do this." I said nothing. Benjamin looked to the witnesses. "Please confirm the signatures on the March 3rd documents." The notary stood calm and precise. Confirmed. Signed, sealed, and filed in my presence. Mr. Adler was of sound mind. Then Caleb, the other witness, added, I delivered the sealed envelope to this office myself. Lena's hands balled into fists. This is a setup. She doesn't deserve any of this. I looked at her then. Fully, the woman who locked me out of my own son's house, who smiled as she packed my life into suitcases, who thought power was loud. I stood slowly, but didn't speak. I didn't need to. Ethan had already spoken the truth. Lena refused to leave. She called it her home, claimed squatters had more rights than I did, said Ethan's recordings were emotional blackmail, not law. I didn't argue. I walked out of the room and into Benjamin's office the next morning. He nodded before I even spoke. I've already filed the revocation. 72 hours. That was the court's order. Lena had 3 days to vacate the estate with security enforcement if necessary. It was signed, sealed, and delivered. When the documents arrived at the house, she didn't read them. She screamed. I stood at the bottom of the staircase as she ripped down photos from the hallway walls, glass shattering against the tile. You think you've won, she snarled. He loved me. He married me. You were just background noise. I didn't flinch. I'd been background noise for years. The quiet one, the polite one, the one who raised him, fed him, taught him, but never demanded the spotlight. She stormed into the sitting room, next throwing designer pillows across the floor like it meant something. Every insult she muttered, every bitter word bounced off me like wind against stone. By evening, she was upstairs packing with the help of a housekeeper who kept her head down and her lips tight. I didn't follow. I didn't hover. Instead, I walked into the garden. The path Ethan helped me build was still there, flagstone and gravel lined with dogwood. My fingers brushed a wilted bloom. The tears came, but they were different this time. Not from grief. Not from defeat. From the aching clarity that justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't roar. It simply restores. He had protected me. Even from the grave, he had drawn the line and dared her to cross it. And now she was packing her heels into boxes, not knowing this house would breathe differently when she was gone. I sat on the old stone bench beneath the arbor, the same one where Ethan once gave me my Mother's Day card, and watched the light shift through the branches. I found the envelope the next morning, tucked beneath a book on the corner of Ethan's desk. The book was one he'd loved as a boy, The Secret Garden. I opened the cover and felt it before I saw it. Something pressed, flat, heavy, with intent. The envelope was thick cream paper, sealed with wax. Inside, a folded sheet of lined paper in his handwriting, slanted neat a little, rushed at the end. Mom, if you're reading this, you made it through. I'm sorry for the way it had to happen. I know Lena would strike fast, and I knew I couldn't stop it in time. But I could prepare the ground. The garden is yours now. All of it. You taught me that love doesn't need to shout to be powerful. And you showed me that some roots grow stronger after the storm. Go to the greenhouse. It's where I left what matters most. Love, Ethan. My legs carried me before I could think. Past the kitchen, through the French doors, down the winding stone path. The early morning sun cut through the mist, lighting the glass panes of the greenhouse with gold. The lock gave easily. Inside, the scent of jasmine hit me first, sweet and sharp, like the past blooming all at once. On the table beside the planting trays sat a simple envelope marked Transfer of Ownership, Garden Estate. My name was written in full. Not mother, not beneficiary. Just Corinne Adler, sole steward. My knees gave slightly as I sat on the wooden bench beside the vines. My fingers curled around the paper like it was his hand. I forgive you, I whispered, voice barely above breath, for leaving me this fight. The jasmine trembled slightly in the breeze from the cracked window, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed without it hurting. Weeks passed like turning pages, slow at first, then suddenly full. I stood at the head of the long walnut table, the same boardroom Ethan used to call the war room. Half a dozen executives sat across from me, arms folded, brows skeptical. They didn't say it out loud, but I knew what they thought: a grieving mother with no business degree, no boardroom pedigree, no reason to be here. But I wasn't here for approval. I was here for him. I won't pretend to be Ethan, I began, but I do know what he wanted. He told me over coffee, over chess games, sometimes in passing, sometimes with his fists clenched. I reached for the file beside me. These were his plans. They were never about stock margins or headlines. They were about equity bonuses for long-term staff, a permanent scholarship fund for underrepresented students, and fully funded clinics in every city where Adler Kellner operated. Starting with the one where his father grew up. The room went still. Someone cleared their throat. Another leaned forward. By the end of the hour, they were taking notes. Benjamin waited until the room emptied before approaching. He handed me a thin folder, cream understated, stamped in legal gold. Final release of assets, he said. Liquid total $180 million. All under your authority. I nodded, but didn't open it right away. I already knew what I wanted. No jewels, no parties, no beachfront photo ops. Instead, I signed the formation documents for the Ethan Adler Trust. Half for education, half for community health. Every dollar accountable. That night, I walked through the quiet house lights low, my hand tracing the banister Ethan once slid down as a boy. In the front hall, I hung his final letter in a simple oak frame right beside the door. He had built a fortune, but he left me something harder to carry and far more valuable. A name worth living up to.